It is 3:30. We're going to get started right here on time. Thank you for joining us today. Our good friend Shelley from Olympus is going to be talking to us about black and white aesthetics. So I'm going to let her define what that is. But before we get started, just a couple little housekeeping things. Number one, the chat window is open, so send me a chat if you need something. And I think Shelley can probably see the chat window also. So we will go through and answer questions as you have them. We know that you folks are out there still shooting and working, and we're really happy that photography is not taking a vacation since COVID-19 is around. So if you need anything, the store is open Monday through Saturday from 10 until 4 for phone calls. You can send emails, and we've got it set up that you can stop in and we will do a curbside pickup for you, or we will ship to you. Any orders over $50 are shipped for free. So please, if you need something, you know, we want you to keep shopping local so that we stay in business and we can be around to serve you for a long time in the future. So thank you for your business. And without further ado, Shelley, it is to you.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Dave. Thanks, Camera Company, for everything that you're doing. And thanks, everybody, for joining me this afternoon to talk about black and white photography. I'm going to share my screen with you guys. I have a PowerPoint because I'm very visual. There we go. So I have quite a few slides here. I'm going to try to make it through all of it. Let's try that again. I do understand that a lot of, you can approach black and white photography from so many different standpoints. So really this is my standpoint and kind of like where I come from and the reasons why I do it the way that I do it. Yeah, so hopefully it will be a little inspiring to some of you, or to all of you. So I'm Shelley Preston. I am the technical sales executive for Olympus. I'm based in Chicago. I might know some of you. I've taught a version of this class for the past year, and it evolves every time I teach it. This is the first time I've taught it through digital means, so I'm used to having a little bit of feedback. I will try to pay attention to the chat box, which I'm gonna open right now. Cool. So really it's to share some inspiration and hopefully to share kind of how I see the world. And so I've got a bit of an agenda here, just so you know what we're going to do in the next hour or so. Hopefully it won't go past an hour. I do have a lot of slides, like I said. Maybe I should talk faster. I'm going to tell you a little bit of background on me, just because I feel like that is relevant and it makes sense to what I'm talking about. I'll tell you why I say shoot in black and white. Some photographers that I find inspiring, some different styles, examples of different elements, and some comparisons of color versus black and white. The examples probably is the longest portion, but I've broken it down into subcategories of different things that I have my eye out for all the time when I'm walking around, when I can walk around. So I'm an artist when I'm not a photographer or a camera rep. These are some examples of what I do. So this is completely opposite of black and white, right? These are like the most vibrant colors out there. My entire house looks like this, except for my office. I put black and white photos in there. But so I've been, one of my friends one time, she was like, I don't understand why you shoot so much in black and white, because you are like the most colorful person I know. And I was like, I know, I love both of them. So I do have a love for color photography as well. I just really, really adore black and white photography. So there's room for both in the world, my point there. Oh, my studio, just so you know that I don't live in like just black and white here. This is where I paint. So why do I shoot in black and white? There's probably more reasons than just these four right here, but I it allows me to see the world differently. If I'm looking at the world in color and 3D, and I am looking through my camera and I see black and white, it changes what I see. It's also meditative for me. That might sound extreme to some people, but it really is. Like, I can walk around town, and if I'm shooting black and white, or I set out to shoot black and white, my 3D world just changes. Like, I start looking just for shapes and repetitions and tones and patterns, and it's really like a different way of seeing everything around you. It is my absolute favorite thing about photography. That's true. Like I said, I love color too, but black and white just it makes me swoon. I don't know that there's a better way to put that there. And also, people have said to me, which I'm probably getting a little ahead of myself here, but people have said to me like, "Well, you can just turn it black and white and post," and that's true. I could, but I almost never have a photo that I've taken in black and white that I wish that I had taken in color. But I do have photos that I've taken in color that I wish that I had taken in black and white on my camera. And I want them taken in black and white on my camera because my camera renders it in a different way than post-processing does. It's not just a little click of a switch to snap it in black and white, which you can do that, but it's just not the same. It's not the same as the way that I see it through my camera, because we'll talk about more in a minute about that. But so this is one example of what I mean when I am looking for shapes. So before my friend Juliet sat down there, I made her sit there. We were just grabbing a cup of coffee whenever you could go lounge in a coffee shop. And I saw this beautiful shape. It was just a triangle shape of light coming in. And then I placed her there because I have this philosophy that if you add life, any kind of life into your photo, it kind of brings a different emotion to it. It brings more interest to it. I have a lot of photos without life in it though, so there's also room for both there. But yeah, so I'm constantly looking for shapes and light. The next slide. What do I shoot? Just a little bit on this. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about gear. It's more about like what you see and how you see it. But I do shoot Olympus. I work for Olympus, obviously. I think that they're wonderful cameras. So I love my Pen F. It is an older camera. It's probably 4 years old now. I would have to double check that. But that's what I shoot mainly. And then I also shoot with the EM1 Mark III and EM1X. And my go-to lenses, I almost always shoot with the 17mm 1.8, which in conversion form, that is, if we're talking about 35mm film size, that's a 35mm focal length equivalent, approximately. And so we're talking field of view there. 7-14, which is a super wide angle, and then an 8mm fisheye, which I like to play with. So in our cameras, we have a fisheye lens that does have the very curved edges. But if you put it on our cameras, you have the option of changing it, defishing it, I guess you could say. Does the rectilinear correction, so you have a straight line, but it's still super wide. It has a very unique look. And so here's a picture right here of me carrying my go-to gear. It's very small, light, compact, which is my next slide here. All of our cameras have in-body image stabilization. Many of them you can hand hold from 2 to 4 seconds. Some of them you can hand hold up to 15 seconds, which is really cool, just because it's such a good stabilization. You can change shadows, highlights, midtones in camera. You can play with colored filters, which I'm still learning. I don't feel like I am knowledgeable enough to know exactly how the colored filters work to explain it to you, but they're very fun to play with. I play with usually red and green filters. Red, I know that if you shoot outside, it makes the sky look better, and green, also I like green filters outside too. But so I'm not going to talk a whole lot about that, but just know that there's options for that. What you see is what you get. So any mirrorless camera, I'm sure you're familiar with if you shoot mirrorless, that when you make adjustments, what you see is what you get in terms of exposure, white balance, and if you are shooting in black and white, you will see black and white through the viewfinder and on the LCD screen, which is really where the magic happens in seeing the world differently around you. There's a color creator, and then there's the PinF has 3 unique monochrome modes that I have never been able to successfully replicate in post-processing, which is why I like to shoot in camera. Yeah, we'll continue. So we'll just get this question out of the way because somebody will always ask this question, and it's a totally valid question. But I have reasons why shoot in black and white and not just adjust it in post-processing. Well, first of all, you'll see the world differently. I've already said that. You will see colors in terms of grayscale. So every color is going to have a tonal value differently than we can actually process it in our brains. Your camera, whichever one you're using, will have a unique look to it just because it renders black and white differently. And if you do make adjustments, like shadows, highlights, midtones, you will create your own look. You will spend less time post-processing. I don't really like to spend a whole lot of time processing my photos if I do adjust things, and I do, but I want it to be done in about 10 seconds. So I just like to have it done in camera. Maybe that comes from shooting film, which I'm sure some of you can relate if you shot on film. You have to get it right the first time. Yeah. And what I mean here by latitude is you can get away with so much more in shooting black and white. So let's say you're at a concert and you need a faster shutter speed because it's dark inside, and you don't want a whole lot of like movement because bands move quickly. You can like really boost up your ISO and have what most people would say, like it's too noisy. In black and white, you can just get away with it because it just works. And you can get away with, if you're in a place where you can't necessarily get your white balance perfect or you don't like the colors, black and white, shoot black and white, and it'll change it. So for those of you that don't think that it's a good idea to shoot in black and white on your camera, I would challenge you to try it for a little while. You can try something new, and you can shoot RAW plus JPEG. So save both of those on your memory card, and your RAW image will still be completely color, just exactly how the camera sees it, and then your JPEG file will be the black and white from your camera. Okay. So just a list of photographers that I find inspiration from: Elliot Erwitt, Deanne Arbus, Sally Mann, Ansel Adams, Dorothea Lange, and Richard Avedon. These are some of my go-to favorites. There are plenty more in the world though, but if you want to kind of like look and study some images, I would start with Elliot Erwitt. So there's a lot of styles in black and white, and just for the sake of time, I'm going to talk about 3 very quickly, just in terms of black and white. So high key, low key, mid key. This is an example of high key. I looked through all my stuff, and I do not have my own example of a high key image. I guess I don't take a lot of high key images, although I do like them. This is a photo by my colleague Mike Amico. So lots of whites, lots of brights. I mean, you might even say a lot of it's overexposed, but then again, like I said, latitude, you have so much latitude, you can get away with these kinds of things. And I think it works for the image. Low key, so a lot of blacks, a lot of darks. And mid key would be like a lot of midtones. So you have a lot of variations in gray here. You do still have some of your really darks there in the back, but So here's a list of colors. All of these colors, like red, there's not just one shade of red. I think blue is the color that has the most shades ever or something listed. I can't remember how many shades there are of blue, but there are many, many. And just to show you what those all look like in black and white, and this is just a simple like switch into black and white. So these would change if you were going to shoot this with a camera and use a filter and adjust different things. But just so you can kind of get an idea, really there's only a few that turn really, really dark, and most of them I wouldn't even consider black. And there are very few that are just white. Actually, none of them look white to me, just completely white. So when we say black and white, we're actually talking about a whole grayscale, tonal scale. And here they are side by side. So when you're shooting, I think that if you are going to strip a scene of color, it can reduce distraction. Like if you are shooting a street and there's construction barrels there and you don't necessarily want those to be the main focus, you can basically take those out with turning it black and white, because then you won't see orange. It can add elegance. It can add emotion. It can change emotion, especially because, you know, light emits a lot of emotion in photos. You can't necessarily tell the difference between what I want to say here, like morning light and evening light in black and white. It's harder to tell, so you don't necessarily, so it changes the way that somebody can interpret an image, because images are constantly communicating to us all the time, whether we know it or not. It can also hide really kind of blah colors, muted colors, or if the light isn't good where you're at. And I think, yeah, here's an example of that. So this is a really foggy day, which foggy days are also fun to shoot in black and white, but it the color isn't that great. And, you know, if I was going to highlight some sort of color, it's hidden by the black and white there. So there's two different approaches that I would say, main approaches to black and white. You can keep it simple, embrace abstract. Abstract meaning it doesn't necessarily have to have a subject, just play with shapes and patterns. So here's just a very simple pattern here. And the other approach, you could allow the grayscale to simplify it for you. So it doesn't necessarily have to be just a very simple subject like this one here. It could be something like this. So there's a lot going on here. There's traffic, there's lines, there's a Christmas tree. But for me, my main focus is the moving car. I don't know if that's the first place that you looked. But that's where that's what I was kind of going for, was movement in this photo. So if it was color, you would probably look at the Christmas tree first, and that's not even really framed in a way that you would want to look at the Christmas tree first. So these are some things, a list of things that I think are great to look for when you're photographing black and white. It's not an exhaustive list, but here they are. So patterns are huge, especially in my opinion. Repetitions, leading lines, and curves. So curves can also be lines. It's not just, you know, a textbook definition, leading lines. It's not just straight lines. So keep that in mind. Textures. I love playing with textures because textures also change the color of black and white. So if you have say you have a chair or something that is velour or velvety, you know, if you run your hand across it, it will change the color. So one side will look like a lighter color, and one will, or lighter shade, I guess I should say, and one will look like a darker shade. Well, that also is true in black and white. It'll pick it up differently. Geometry, and a lot that goes along with geometry, in my opinion, is architecture, because there's a lot going on there. Symmetry is also fun. Nature, a lot of people think nature you wouldn't necessarily want to shoot in black and white because your one of your main focuses is color, like green and flowers and stuff, but you really can produce beautiful black and white nature photos. And there's some famous photographers out there. Ancelot is a nature photographer, and I can't think of the person's name. It's a very famous photograph of a bell pepper. It'll come to me later. But light rays, we'll keep going because I thought I had so many. We're doing okay on time. Light rays are huge. That's a thing that I look for all the time. Glow, and I'll have some examples of that. Reflections are always fun to play with. And then the photography rules I put in quotations because I think rules are good to know, but also really great to break. Rule of thirds is probably the thing that I think of most of the time. Fibonacci spiral, and pay attention to framing, use framing, and these different things. So different juxtapositions. Street photography is classic black and white, and portraits are also great in black and white and abstract. So I've got a lot of examples of these things just so that you can get a visual of what I'm talking about. Oh, and here's, if you're not familiar with the Fibonacci spiral, this is obviously rule of thirds, how you would place one of your main subjects in one of the crosses. That's how that works. And the Fibonacci spiral, which I don't think I've ever successfully taken a picture that follow the Fibonacci spiral because I can't see it, but one of these days maybe I'll be able to. Repetition patterns. So here we've got repeating patterns, and we have different shapes. We have circles and rectangles. Brick with lots of repeating patterns, lots of texture on the brick too, which is probably why I photographed this, because it's, and the juxtaposition of the plant against stone like that, or brick. And this was also at night, so I wouldn't have ever been able to get a really, really super great photo in that type of lighting. It's like street lighting. So I also would choose to shoot in black and white because of that. Shadows here. So shadows can create a lot of repetitions and patterns. Also the sand there has kind of a repetition. But what I noticed first here were the light rays, and then I noticed that the light rays match the shadows that it's making with the little snow fences there. I did take this in color, and I didn't necessarily love it. So, Edward Weston, thank you, Dave. He's the one that photographed the pepper. Repeating patterns here also. So this would also fall under like my nature category, but I would say if you wanted to shoot with repeating patterns, like in this kind of context, to just fill up the frame with it. And because that's the entire subject, you wouldn't necessarily want, well, depending on what it looks like, but I would say you wouldn't necessarily want like a wall showing here. You would just want to really hone in on the pattern that you're trying to show. More repetitions and shadows. I love these snow fences. Maybe it's because I'm from Texas originally and we didn't have these, but I love the way that these shadows cast onto sand and the way that sand looks in photos. Leading lines. If you ever get a chance to go to the Great Sand Dunes in Colorado, I would highly recommend it. It is majestic, absolutely beautiful. I did photograph a lot in color here, but mostly in black and white. So here's an example of leading lines that are not necessarily linear. They're taking your eye through it, especially starting at the bottom left portion and taking you through it. You can create lines here. So I noticed the lines in the curtains, and then I also wanted to add an element of life in there, but also kind of mess the lines up so that you have these kind of curves going through it. Leading lines that are going directly into, so creating depth here. Curvy lines, but also take you through the image, like creating depth. This would also be an example of a day that I just didn't want to shoot in color because I the color was kind of drab and muted. But I left them in black and white. Same, this is the same day. So more lines here in nature. So these are all kind of, I guess you could look at it two different ways. They're either converging into one of they're all going facing a similar point, or they're fanning out. Here are lines also. If you keep looking at this, you'll see more and more and more lines, which I thought was actually kind of interesting. Actually, I didn't think this photo was interesting when I first took it, and then I started seeing all the different lines, and they're all so perpendicular. And that made me like it. So you even have the street lines down here. I was taking a picture of the bicyclist, and I wanted to show motion, so I slowed my shutter speed down a little bit, which you can do with stabilization. Textures. What time is it? Lots of different textures here. This is also the Great Sand Dunes. So the sand dunes change like the landscape because blows and the wind blows and changes things, creates these ridges in the sand. And then I was paying attention a lot to the shadows here as well. But these textures, even though it's the same element, we're looking at sand in the foreground and sand in the background. It looks a lot smoother in the background. So even if it's the same actual thing, the textures can be different based on, you know, shadows and light, the way the light hits it. Different textures here. So we have a fluffy dog and a wooden floor. Also, I noticed the repeating lines and patterns here. A frozen windshield or window. I think that was my window. So even when it's -3 and freezing outside, I'm still looking for patterns and light and shapes. That was in Madison. It was a very cold day. Oops, we already saw this one. Textures, I guess, is what I was gonna put there. I tried to not repeat pictures, but so some geometry and architecture. I don't shoot a lot of architecture, so I don't feel like, you know, super well versed on all the rules for architecture, but I do see lines and shadows and patterns and geometry. So I do shoot some architecture, just not necessarily with the rules that people make up to shoot architecture. Used a super wide angle, so we do have the kind of the converging lines here, but lots of lines, lots of repeating things and the wooden texture as well. Some people say when they see this, looks like MC Escher, but this is actually, I mean, this is a library in Austin, Texas, and I did shoot this in color, which I put in the, like later on in the presentation, just so you can see the side by side. I preferred it in black and white because, well, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but you have a lot of gray tones here and a lot of lines. Something a little bit more simple. One of my travel rules, because I do travel a lot for my job, obviously not right now, but I also like to travel for just for personal vacation with my friends. One of my rules for travel photography is to take a photo that tells more of a story and tells like where you are, or at least a hint of where you are, and a photo that can't necessarily be Googled. Like if you're gonna take a photo of the Eiffel Tower, you can Google a bunch of better Eiffel Tower photos probably. But if you take a picture of you or a loved one in that photo with the Eiffel Tower, you can't Google it. So that's just a rule. And I broke this rule here. It's just umbrellas, but I loved the patterns and I loved the really, really high contrast here. But you would never know that this is in Portugal. So I broke my own rule, but rules are meant to be broken, right? A lot of lines here, architecture. Also more, spirals are fun to photograph in black and white because the light changes as it goes down or up, depending on which way you're looking at it. But the light will change the contrast and the grayscale. Some more interesting kind of architecture here, where normally I guess you would take more of a wide angle here, but I liked the curves of it, and I liked the way that the light was reflecting off of the curves. That was mainly what I was looking at. I wasn't necessarily photographing it for architecture. The domes in Milwaukee is great. That was a real treat for me to go. I had no idea these places existed.
Domes in Milwaukee, look it up.
What's that? It's a great place to photograph nature, but also black and white with all these repeating patterns. And this is also just a bunch of repeating patterns and reflections here. This is if you ever get to go to the Wonder Museum in Chicago, I would recommend it. It's a fun place. But you can also see lines in this one. Like once you start to look at it, you'll see kind of like lines taking you through the image. Here's one that I normally talk about, balance, because it's really not balanced because of you've got the building in the bottom right, but because there is something filling the frame, like the birds in the top left, I think that the image works. So juxtaposition, kind of. Light, rays, shadows, and glow. This one is one of my favorite black and white photographs I've ever taken. I first took it in color and didn't like it because the images or the colors were so muted. But I noticed the sunlight coming in through the window, and I also made my friend go stand in the light because I wanted to add life into my photo. And she's a great muse because she does not mind, getting in front of the camera. Some people are a little shy there. But it's what I saw was the sun coming through the window, and then I could also see the how it was illuminated on the brick where she's standing and the floor. So then I just created this line through it. Lots of textures, and then the glow in her hair. So that's what I'm talking about when I say glow, is kind of a backlit glow. If light is behind something or someone, and it'll illuminate the outside. I kind of forgot. Oh, light rays. This is just a very simple photo that has texture and geometric shapes and light coming through, which I really like. Taking simple photos like this doesn't necessarily tell a story, but it does make you wonder. More glow. The bar here that's reflecting will take your eye through the image, but what I really noticed was the glow of my friend's hair right there, coming from the one window in this place, the Green Mill Jazz Room. Also here, what I noticed mostly from here, it's actually a little bit lighter on the screen. I don't know what y'all's screens look like, but what I noticed mostly whenever I took this photo was the front of this person in the photo was illuminated just with like a strip of highlight. And that's why I took the photo. It ended up being one of my favorite photos from the sand dunes, but you can also see that the highlight of the two ridges that this person is on. And also the whole landscape changes with the sun. So the sun will rise and it will look really golden. Obviously, it's called one of the golden hours, right? But it does change the landscape as the sun moves across, and it'll change the shadows and the shapes that you see. It's pretty wonderful. Some more also patterns, not just light and shadows and patterns also here in life. A little bit of symmetry. I think that symmetry is fun to play with in black and white. There's some lines going through this photo, but it's also divided very symmetrically, and also here's very symmetrical looking, that I think works. There's also a lot of patterns and textures here too, which make the black and white work. Some motion. I love to play with motion, walking around Chicago, especially because there's a lot of motion usually. I don't remember what my shutter speed was here, but I thought that this told a cool story, some guy rushing by, and in black and white at night. This one I first took with shutter speed that stopped the action. This is snow, and I mentioned I'm from Texas, so you know snow is still pretty fantastic to me. But it was really, really coming down in Michigan here. And so I slowed my shutter speed down, and then it created like all of these really cool snow trails. And it's just a very simple thing that can change the way that you see something. Also, this is a street light, so the color isn't necessarily the most beautiful at night, I guess. At least I didn't like the way that the color looked, and I'm not going to go out there and do a custom white balance just for this photo. So I actually really liked it in black and white. This is something that you normally really wouldn't shoot in black and white because it's so colorful. Maybe if you're this one of those carnival rides, but I do kind of like it. And I slowed actually I think I used our live ND on this, but you do have to slow your shutter speed down to see that kind of motion. And just a couple of ideas on framing. So this is a photo that frames more frames. It's not necessarily framing an actual subject here. It's just kind of repeating the same frame over, but leading your eye through it. This one is actually a frame, and a bit of a reflection in the side is kind of an afterthought, but we were in a lighthouse here, so I'm using the elements around me to create a story and frame a little sailboat here. And some abstract, this is one of my favorite things to do in photography in general, is abstract photography. I love it because I guess I feel like when I say abstract, there really are no rules. There's no constraints. I just do whatever I want to do. So just some kind of examples of what I'm talking about there. So bricks in a pattern with a shadow on it. And what I liked about this was the visual difference of like, you know, man-made versus nature kind of concept. This was an interesting little, like a moss-covered lake here. It is pretty vibrant green, which normally you would shoot in. I should have put the actual color one in here just to show y'all too, but I forgot. I liked it better in black and white because I could see so many different tones of gray here. Lots of patterns crisscrossing here. But the more you look at it, you can eventually see some footsteps in it. So the first thing that you see is like what actually is going on here. But once you start looking at it and kind of studying the image, you see more. You might eventually see kind of a story there. Here's one of just life imitating life. I would never have taken this in color because the wallpaper was black and white. Actually, it was probably a faded yellow at that point, but and then the tattoo is also grayscale, so which makes sense to take it in black and white. Reflections here. That's the first thing I saw here at the Javits Center was the reflection on the floor. I think it was just so beautiful and light filled in here. But I also wanted to show the rest of what was going on to the right. If I had this was taken with my 17mm, and the reason I remember that specifically is because I saw later on, after I noticed the reflection, then I saw this person here way back there reading a newspaper, and just looked so so timeless. Like timeless might not be the right description, but you don't see that so much anymore. It's always somebody on a phone now, just staring at their phone doing whatever. But this person was actually reading a newspaper, and it was just so refreshing to me. I would have probably used a telephoto lens just to capture that moment, but I'm not much of a people photographer, so I went with the reflection. So in portraits, I just thought I don't do a lot of people, but portraits, sometimes in my line of work, I either have a very good opportunity to, or the moment's just right. So here was, this was actually a workshop by Tracy McGlasky. So this is her kind of idea and concept. She eventually had her stand on the whatever this is, stand up on that, and the dress actually went all the way to the ground. So she looked like she was just super, super giant. So I have a couple of questions. Our camera levels, 0. Yeah, I don't adjust my in-camera contrast, saturation, and sharpness. Sometimes I adjust my shadows and highlights and midtones,
Yeah.
but I don't typically.
Question submitted to her, and she's answering them, but she isn't telling people what the question is.
Oh, sorry. I thought everybody could see these on the chat here.
Now she's
So the question is, are your camera levels at 0, -1, +1 in contrast, saturation, and sharpness? No, mine are at 0. I wouldn't actually, I might try to boost up the contrast, because I like in black and white, I like a little bit more contrast usually. But yeah. And so then the next question is, do you ever use keystone comp with architectural photos to prevent that leaning feeling and square up a building to the sensor? Yes, I love using keystone compensation. It makes and you don't have to do that in post-processing. It just does a really great job. Yeah. I kind of lost my train of thought here. Okay, portraits. That's what we're talking about. Like I said, the moment was just right here. Also, my friend who's not afraid of the camera, I asked her to kind of lean back so that I could illuminate part of her face. Because what I noticed was the texture on the chair that she was sitting in, and it just worked out like that. And also would have shot it only in black and white because it was really, really kind of dark, loungy area. So I wouldn't have even tried to make the colors look like normal. So, and don't forget, animals can have portraits too. So I just liked this one in black and white because I liked the grayscale, what showed up there. And I think that the sky was kind of backlit, so maybe the colors weren't actually perfect. Street is very, very classic. This was a moment that I just didn't frame it right, and my settings weren't quite right, but I still love the photo. It's way too bright. It's way too overblown, obviously, but it just looked like, I don't know, that movie. I don't know. It just looked like a really great moment, and I cut his feet off too, which you would never want to do this in photography. Even that's a rule that I typically don't break, is cutting feet off or hands off like that. So, and some examples of nature here. These are some of my favorites that I've taken at, I think, at the conservatory here. But the one other thing that I don't think I've mentioned in this class is odd numbers are always a good thing to shoot if you're going to shoot something like this or something abstract. 3 is generally the magic number, but we as humans prefer to look at things in odd numbers. One of these days I'm going to research the science behind that, but it's a thing. Nature has a lot of curves, lots of lines. So this becomes more about the lines and the shapes and the shadows versus an actual plant. Like, you know that it's a plant, but it kind of changes what you're looking at there. Same thing here. I just noticed the lines. I'm taking pictures of shapes and lines basically here. So here, is the section where we're just going to kind of go through, and normally what I would do is have a discussion with people, but I don't know that this is the best kind of platform for that. Feel free to type in comments, but I'll kind of go through it. Yeah, we'll just go with this. So this one you already saw, and here is the color next to it. See how they're kind of flat and not like, I don't know, the most exciting. I just thought that the black and white made it stand out more starkly. And so here's side by side. And this one here was taken with a filter on my Pen F, and I believe it was the red filter. So that I do want to disclose, but I was taking pictures of lines here. So you can see the two kind of columns of bricks in the middle, or kind of in the thirds. And then the bicycle was really what kind of caught my attention. I just loved that combination there. And then I took the same one in color, and you can see that your eye immediately goes to the right because of the red colors over here. And I wouldn't have framed my picture that way if I had wanted that to be the subject. I wanted the other part to be the subject. And so by changing it to black and white, you see more of what I was seeing rather than what your eye is drawn to. And so here they are side by side again. Here's a photo that is just, you know, I see lights and I see patterns and textures, and I'm probably going to take a picture of it. Here it is in color, which I think turns out to be completely underwhelming. And in fact, one time, I would taught this in one class, and the person, somebody commented, they're like, yeah, it kind of lost me because this photo is boring. And that's totally fine, but my point, I guess was kind of my point, I like it better in black and white. Like, it's a more interesting photo in black and white. And there's people in it. Here's another example of black and white and color. I think that the black and white just is more intriguing here. This was kind of an on assignment kind of project, not my typical work, but I thought it was a good example because it's really boring. This is a really boring color, in my opinion, but in black and white, and it does look like I boosted the contrast here in post. I might have even used dramatic tone. I don't think I did. I bet the sky would have shown up better, but there is an art filter in Olympus cameras called dramatic tone that's wonderful to play with. There's a color and there's a black and white, and it makes the sky just really kind of pop, and it usually makes the cement and things like that pop like that. Yeah, but I thought that was. Here's one that I used a green filter with. I remember specifically because I was trying to teach myself what exactly these filters do. And so yeah, shapes, geometric stuff, and here it is. It's not the exact same one, but same time. So it's a completely different feel. You can see the sunlight coming from the right. The sun is obviously setting because of the angle it's hitting my boots. I just liked it so much better in black and white. And my red coat is also distracting there, where normally it would be a bigger subject, but not in this case. So here's the library. I realized that it's, I'm taking a lot of time here, so thanks for being here. Thanks for sticking with me. Here it is in black and white, here it is in color. The color, oh, where'd it go? Oh, I guess I didn't put it in. I thought I put it in as a bigger one. But it's really golden, and on the very right, that's where I specifically don't necessarily like it, because the different lights that are in this building, you know, are going to pick up different, they're different Kelvin, so they're going to render differently on your sensor. And one easy way around that is to shoot in black and white. You notice different things in the black and white one than in the color one. One of the same pictures that I showed you earlier this is also the same library. And there is the side-by-side color. This color one doesn't necessarily, like, I like it fine, but I like it better in black and white. Just, I don't know. It seems more elegant, I guess, to me. So, just a little note on when I would say not to shoot in color or not to shoot in black and white. When the main focus is color, like a holiday or the color run where they have all the colors going on. Sunsets, obviously, or sunrises, the main focus is the color that the sky creates. So I would say that you wouldn't really want to do that. I don't think I've ever taken a black and white sunset photo. When the image when the image looks flat, and there's not enough gray variations. Like, if sometimes when you do take a photo in black and white, everything is kind of comes out as the same value in color, and you wouldn't necessarily want to. Color might help in that instance, and then obviously when you don't want to. But I do recommend it, especially since we have some time to kind of experiment and play around. Just walk around your neighborhood if you can, or your house, and photograph things in black and white and just see you'll see in a different way. So this is a similar image to one I showed you earlier. That is, like, one of the main focuses is color, and it was also the sun was setting. This one, even as much as I love those little snow fences and the shadows that they make, I would probably not photograph this in black and white because of the color that the sun created. I just thought it was really pretty, and especially in the highlights and the waves. I don't know, maybe I'll try and just see what it looks like. But things like this is was one of the most unique windows I've ever seen. They're all a different color. So I would never have chosen to shoot that in black and white because I wanted the color to show. Flowers here. This is, I did have a section on nature. Like, you could take this in black and white, and all those flowers are going to show up as a different color of gray, shade of gray. But the color was just more interesting to me. And here, the pink wall is what caught my attention in the first place, so I wanted this one in color. A little bit of other inspiration if you're not convinced yet that black and white is the most amazing thing ever. I'm just kidding. These are some really great movies to watch. La Jetée is a French sci-fi film. It's pretty short. I think it's under 30 minutes, actually. That really had an impact on me when I was in college. I would highly recommend that movie if you like sci-fi. And then A Wonderful Life and The Jazz Singer. These are all, you probably have seen those, but I think The Jazz Singer was the first film that they filmed at the same time they put music in. First film that they had music in. I don't know. I'm getting that wrong. I'm sorry, but there's some trivia there. Let's see. I think, okay, yeah, I guess that's it. So this is probably my favorite black and white photo of all time. I was not around for this photo because these are my grandparents, but thought I'd end on that. Does anybody have any questions or anything that you would have hoped to talk about?
Shelley, I'm going to unmute everybody, so if people have questions, go ahead and jump in.
Okay.
So everybody's been unmuted. Thank you very much. And while you're doing that, I'm going to take this screen over for a second.
Oh, yeah. Do you want me to stop share?
Yeah, that's fine. You can do that. And I'm going to go back to speaker view, and I am going to find, there we go. There it is, and we're going to share. Okay, you should see a picture of Edward Weston's Pepper number 30. This is the one that Shelley was talking about. This particular image is interesting. He had to create his own basically aperture, and it was equivalent to an f240, which is almost a pinhole. And the exposure was somewhere between 4 and 6 hours is what he was doing to get these images.
Wow.
So there's a photography. And earlier you asked about photographers that light your board and get you inspired. I personally, you know, have a long list, but Joe McNally and Moose Peterson top my list, as well as like Tamara Lackey, Jen Rosenbaum. I follow a lot of people on Instagram. Michelle Norris Photography is one, and she does a lot of really crazy things with color. So folks out there, who inspires you? Give me some names of photographers you like.
Alfred Stieglitz.
Oh, Stieglitz is great. Absolutely. Shelley had mentioned Elliot Irwit. He has a book called Snaps. If you can find a copy of it, they go anywhere from $30 for a used book to hundreds of dollars for hardbound. I don't think it's in print anymore, but it is an awesome book, and it's all black and white. So it talks to all these examples Shelley talked about today. Any other photographers that people are excited by? I suggest that you follow them on Instagram if you can find them, and if they're active, get them on Instagram. They put some really good work out there on a day-to-day basis. Well, Shelley, thank you. If nothing else, thank you very much. Randall, I like your background. You've got a new one up there today, I see. You know, make sure that
black and white, you know.
There you go. Thank you. Well, thank you all for taking time to be with us today. Shelley, this was great. You've got a lot of great examples and ideas there, and I am inspired. Black and white is where I started, and I keep going back to it on a regular basis. Have fun, make some great photos, share them with us. Until next time, remember to check us out on Instagram, like us on Facebook. This particular session will be archived in our YouTube channel, so subscribe to our YouTube channel and ring the bell, so every time we put a new video up there, you'll see it. And again, thank you very much. Thank you for being loyal camera company customers, and we look forward to seeing you when all this is over and I can get a haircut and not be so shaggy. You guys have a great day. Thank you so much. Thank you, Shelley.
Thanks. Thank
We're
you.
gonna end this right now. Have a good day.